What if I told you that for months, the entire world, sea, scientific, and military communities have been tracking an object that has systematically shattered that illusion, replacing cosmic loneliness with a chilling, creeping dread? What if the visitor we've always speculated about wasn't Tiutum, a biological entity in a silver ship, but something far older, far stranger, and far more incomprehensible? Tonight, we pull back the curtain on the story that has been hidden from the public, a story of an object named 3I, Atlas, an object that defied physics, transformed before our eyes, and may have just declared our solar system its new home. Our story begins not with a bang, but with a whisper that something was fundamentally wrong in the heavens. When the Atlas survey, the Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, first flagged the interstellar object 3A Atlas, it was catalogued as just another cosmic vagrant, a lonely wanderer from a distant star system passing through our neighborhood. Comets, as we know them, are dirty snowballs. As they approach the sun, the ice sublimates. It turns directly from a solid to a gas, creating a beautiful, ethereal tail of dust and gas that is always, without exception, pushed away from the sun by the solar wind and radiation pressure. It's one of the most basic, predictable behaviors in celestial mechanics, a law as reliable as gravity itself. But 3I Atlas was different. When the Hubble Space Telescope, our unblinking eye in the void, turned its gaze upon this traveler, astronomers saw something that made them question their own instruments, then their textbooks, and finally, their understanding of the universe. The object had a tail, yes, but it wasn't pointing away from the sun. It was pointing directly at it. Imagine standing in a hurricane, holding a long silk ribbon, and instead of the wind whipping it violently behind you, the ribbon stretches out stiffly, defiantly, straight into the teeth of the gale. That's what Hubble saw, a brilliant, luminous plume, a sunward anti-tail, projected from the object as if in active defiance of the sun's immense power. The initial reaction in the astronomical community was disbelief, followed by a frantic search for a conventional explanation. Could it be a trick of the light? Perhaps we were seeing sunlight reflecting off a strange, forward-facing cloud of dust in a peculiar alignment. This is known as a true anti-tail, a phenomenon where dust particles left in the comet's orbit can appear to point toward the sun from our specific vantage point on Earth. It's an optical illusion, a line of sight effect. But the rigorous analysis that followed quickly dismantled that comfortable theory. Spectrographic data, the process of breaking down light into its constituent colors to identify its chemical makeup and physical properties, showed this was not reflected light. The plume was an active, organized emission. The light was being generated by the material itself, glowing with its own energy. More bewilderingly, Doppler analysis, which measures the velocity of material by shifts in its light frequency, revealed that the particles within this anti-tail weren't just randomly spewing out. They were flowing in controlled, laminar streams. Laminar flow is the opposite of turbulence. It's smooth, orderly, and predictable, like honey being poured from a jar. In the chaotic environment of space, with the sun blasting it with radiation, such a controlled emission was simply unheard of. This wasn't a passive object being sculpted by solar forces. This was an object with an internal process, a mechanism that was actively and precisely directing a stream of energized material against the solar wind. It was like discovering a fish that could not only swim up a waterfall, but was generating its own countercurrent to do so. The implications were staggering. This directional, persistent glow hinted at something more than natural geology. It suggested an internal guidance system, a controlled process that had no precedent in the natural cosmos. The first whisper of wrongness had become a shout, and the world's most powerful telescopes were all turning to listen. This celestial anomaly was no longer just a curiosity. It was a profound, physics-defying mystery. As astronomers around the globe scrambled to make sense of the anti-tail 3I Atlas prepared its next act, one that would shift the narrative from a physical anomaly to a chemical enigma. The stage was set for the night of September 7th, 2025, during a full lunar eclipse. Under the dimmed, coppery glow of the eclipsed moon, astrophotographers and observatories had their lenses trained on the object, hoping to gather more data in the darkened sky. What they captured was not just more data, but a spectacle that defied belief. Overnight, in the span of just a few hours, 3I Atlas transformed. It began to glow a brilliant, almost supernatural emerald green. Now, a green glow in a comet isn't entirely unheard of. It's typically the signature of dicarbon, C2, a simple molecule formed by two carbon atoms bonded together. When bombarded by the sun's ultraviolet radiation, these molecules are excited and then fluoresce, emitting light in a distinct green wavelength. This green halo, however, is always confined to the comet's head, or coma. As the dicarbon molecules are pushed into the tail, they are quickly broken down by further solar radiation, so the tail itself never glows green. But here was the first problem. The James Webb Space Telescope, JWST, with its unparalleled ability to perform detailed spectroscopic analysis in the infrared spectrum, had already delivered a comprehensive chemical profile of 3I Atlas. The data was unequivocal. The object contained almost no dicarbon, the very chemical ingredient required for a comet's typical green glow, was conspicuously absent. So, where was this breathtaking viridian light coming from? Theorists, desperate to find a natural explanation, posited a massive, sudden surge in cyanide production, specifically cyanogen, CN. When cyanogen molecules are excited, they can also emit light, some of it in the green and violet parts of the spectrum. Perhaps a deep, previously frozen pocket of cyanide within the object had been exposed to the sun, causing a dramatic flash sublimation event. Yet, this theory crumbled under the weight of the evidence. The sheer suddenness and intensity of the transformation didn't fit any known model of cometary outgassing. Natural processes are messy and gradual. A pocket of ice doesn't just instantly vaporize. It sublimates over time, creating a plume that grows and fades. 3I Atlas didn't just brighten, it switched on. It was as if someone had flipped a cosmic light switch. Furthermore, accompanying the color change were observable structural changes to the object's coma. The smooth, controlled flow of the anti-tail began to show new, intricate patterns, almost like ripples or filaments weaving through the green haze. This wasn't the chaotic explosion of a sublimating gas pocket. This suggested the activation of a complex, coordinated process. The green glow wasn't a natural fluorescence. It was a symptom of a fundamental change within the object itself. Imagine a gray rock sitting in your garden that, overnight, not only begins to glow with the intensity of a traffic light, but also changes its surface texture into perfectly etched spirals. You wouldn't assume it was a geological process. You would assume something had been activated inside it. This was the conclusion being reluctantly whispered in secure video conferences connecting observatories from Chile to Hawaii. The green transformation was not a natural event. It was an act of impossible chemistry, a signal that we were not observing a dead rock, but something that was very much alive, or at the very least, operational. With the mystery of the green glow hanging in the air, the JWST was tasked with a new, urgent mission. Perform a continuous, deep chemical analysis. Every photon of light emanating from 3I Atlas was to be captured, dissected, and scrutinized. The results that came back didn't just deepen the mystery, they broke every existing model of what a comet could be. The object wasn't just anomalous, it was a chemical rebel, a singularity that defied cosmic norms. The first shocking discovery was its water content, or rather, the lack thereof. Comets, born in the frigid outer reaches of star systems, are defined by water ice. It is their primary component. But 3I Atlas was bone dry. Instead, its dominant volatile was carbon dioxide, CO2. The analysis revealed a staggering 8.1 ratio of carbon dioxide to water. To put this in perspective, the most CO2-rich comets ever observed in our solar system barely reach a 1.1 ratio. 3I Atlas wasn't just an outlier. It was 6 standard deviations beyond the mean. In statistical terms, this is an impossibility. It's like finding a human who is 15 feet tall. It's so far outside the normal distribution that it suggests the subject does not belong to the same category at all. This finding alone was enough to rewrite textbooks. But it was only the beginning. The JWST's sensitive instruments detected the unmistakable signatures of complex organic molecules, long-chain hydrocarbons, amino acid precursors, and other building blocks of life. In a normal comet, such delicate molecules would have been shattered and degraded by billions of years of exposure to harsh interstellar cosmic radiation. The universe is a shooting gallery of high-energy particles that relentlessly break down complex chemistry. For these molecules to exist in such abundance and in such pristine condition, they either had to be freshly created or perfectly shielded. The data pointed not to simple sublimation, but to active, controlled chemical synthesis. The ratios of different chemicals being expelled from the object weren't constant, as they would be if a uniform block of ice were sublimating. Instead, they were fluctuating in complex, non-random patterns. It was as if the object had an internal thermostat and chemical reactor, deciding which compounds to produce and in what quantities at any given moment. The analogy of an industrial factory became inescapable. A natural object is like a melting iceberg. It passively releases what it's made of. 3I Atlas was behaving like a refinery. It appeared to be taking raw materials, perhaps the carbon and oxygen it was scooping up from the interstellar medium or from its own internal stores, and actively processing them. It was manufacturing complex molecules and expelling them in controlled, deliberate streams. The sunward anti-tail wasn't just an exhaust plume. It was the emission stack of a functioning chemical plant. This discovery had profound and terrifying implications. If it was a factory, who built it? What was it producing? And for what purpose? The presence of life's building blocks might have once been a source of excitement, evidence of panspermia, the theory that life spreads between star systems via comets. But in the context of all the other anomalies, it felt less like a seed of life and more like an industrial byproduct. We were not looking at a messenger of life, but at a piece of autonomous, mobile technology with a functioning and utterly alien industrial capacity. As the chemical data from the JWST sent shockwaves through the scientific community, another team of astronomers, using the Very Large Telescope, VLT, in Chile's Atacama Desert, made a discovery that elevated the mystery from the realm of anomalous chemistry to impossible metallurgy. The VLT, with its battery of 4 massive 8.2-meter telescopes, can perform what's called high dispersion spectroscopy, a technique that allows for the incredibly precise identification of individual elements, even in trace amounts, from billions of miles away. As they analyzed the light from the object's coma, they found an emission line in the spectrum that at first seemed to be an error. It was the unmistakable spectral fingerprint of pure nickel. In the natural universe, this is impossible. Nickel and iron are forged together in the hearts of dying stars, in the unimaginable heat and pressure of a supernova explosion. They are cosmic twins, inextricably linked by the laws of nuclear physics. Their atoms have similar weights and properties, causing them to condense and accrete together in asteroids, planets, and every natural celestial body. You can find nickel-iron alloys everywhere, from the core of our own planet to the meteorites that fall to its surface. What you can never find anywhere in nature is pure nickel without a corresponding amount of iron. To separate nickel from iron is not a natural process. It is an industrial one. On Earth, it requires sophisticated technology and immense energy. Processes like the Mond process or pyrometallurgical smelting involve heating nickel-iron ores to extremely high temperatures in a controlled environment to selectively remove the iron and other impurities, leaving behind refined pure nickel. The detection of pure nickel streaming from 3I Atlas was not a geological fingerprint. It was an industrial one. It was the equivalent of finding a stainless steel bolt in a sealed Egyptian tomb, a clear, unambiguous sign of advanced technology where none should exist. This discovery was the nail in the coffin for any remaining naturalistic explanations. A sunward anti-tail might be some bizarre, unknown plasma interaction. The green glow could be an exotic chemical reaction we had yet to discover. The strange CO2 ratio could, with a great stretch of the imagination, point to formation in a very strange, undiscovered type of protoplanetary disk. But pure nickel? That has no natural explanation. It implies a process of high-temperature metallurgy, of smelting and refining. The object moving through our solar system was not just a chemical factory. It was a foundry. It was capable of processing raw metals and refining them to a state of purity that nature cannot achieve. The puzzle pieces were beginning to form a terrifying picture. This was not a comet. It was a sophisticated piece of technology, ancient and alien, capable of manufacturing chemicals and refining metals as it traveled through the void. The questions became more urgent and more frightening. Why would a probe need a mobile foundry? What was it building? Or what was it preparing to build? Now that it had entered our star system, the silent intruder was beginning to look less like a passive observer and more like a self-sufficient, mobile industrial complex on a mission. With the physical and chemical nature of 3I Atlas pointing squarely toward an artificial origin, a separate team of astrophysicists was working on a question that was, in some ways, even more profound. Where did it come from, and how long had it been traveling? By meticulously plotting the object's trajectory, a process known as astrometry, they could rewind its journey through space, tracing its path back through the galaxy. This required incredibly precise measurements of its position and velocity, cross-referenced against the known positions and movements of nearby stars. The calculations were complex, requiring supercomputers to run simulations for weeks on end. When the results came in, they delivered the most mind-bending revelation of all. The trajectory analysis traced the origin of 3I Atlas not to a nearby star system, but to the galaxy's thick disk. Our Milky Way galaxy is structured like a spiral, with most stars, including our Sun, residing in the thin disk. Surrounding this is a more diffuse, puffier region called the thick disk, which is populated by ancient stars. These are some of the first stars that formed in our galaxy's history, relics from a much earlier cosmic era. Based on its trajectory and velocity, the computers calculated the object's estimated age. The number that emerged was almost incomprehensible, over 7 billion years old. Let that sink in for a moment. Our entire solar system, the Sun, the Earth, all the planets, and every rock and speck of dust within it, is only about 4.6 billion years old. This object was older than our world. It was older than our Sun. It was a relic from the dawn of the galaxy, a messenger from a time before the Earth even existed. This discovery recontextualized everything. The advanced technology it displayed was not just alien. It was ancient. It was the product of a civilization that arose, matured, and developed metallurgy, chemistry, and interstellar travel billions of years before life on Earth had even progressed beyond single-celled organisms. We were not just encountering another intelligence. We were encountering one of the galaxy's first, an elder race of unimaginable antiquity. The implications were dizzying. What was the galaxy like 7 billion years ago? The universe was younger, smaller, and chemically different. Star formation was more violent and chaotic. What kind of civilization could arise in such an environment? What challenges did they face? What technologies did they create? 3I Atlas was not just a probe. It was a time capsule, a piece of archaeological evidence from a chapter of cosmic history that we never knew existed. Its journey alone was a testament to its sophistication. To travel for billions of years through the interstellar medium, weathering cosmic radiation, micrometeoroid impacts, and the gravitational pull of countless stars, and still arrive in a fully functional state was an engineering feat beyond our wildest dreams. Our own probes, like the Voyagers, will be inert, silent ghosts in a few hundred years. This object was an active, functioning machine after a journey that spanned a significant fraction of the age of the universe. The mystery of its purpose deepened. Was it an explorer, a lone survivor of a long-dead civilization, endlessly cataloging the galaxy? Was it a seed ship, looking for a new home? Or was its purpose something darker, an ancient sentinel, a forgotten weapon, now awakening in our backyard? The object was no longer just an anomaly. It was a ghost from a past so deep it defied human comprehension, and it was forcing us to confront the unnerving possibility that the history of intelligence in our galaxy began long before us, and we are merely the latest, youngest children in a very old and very mysterious home. As the irrefutable evidence for 3i Atlas's artificial nature mounted, the scientific community fractured. Mainstream institutions remained cautious, speaking publicly in coded language about unusual properties and unexplained phenomena, but behind the scenes, a more radical and alarming theory was gaining traction, championed by the famously audacious Harvard physicist Avi Loeb. Loeb had previously courted controversy by suggesting that the first observed interstellar object, Oumuamua, was an alien artifact. Now, with 3i Atlas, he argued the case was no longer speculative. It was a statistical certainty. He proposed the most direct and most terrifying explanation. 3i Atlas was not just an artifact, it was an active, intelligent alien probe. And its behavior suggested a purpose that could be deeply hostile. Loeb's central argument rested on the object's trajectory, which he described as statistically impossible. It wasn't just its interstellar origin that was rare, it was the specific path it was taking through our solar system. The probe was on a precise course that would cause its closest approach to the Sun, its perihelion, to occur while it was directly behind the solar disk from Earth's perspective. For a period of 6 weeks, it would be completely hidden from our view, masked by the blinding glare of our own star. A natural object arriving from interstellar space on such a perfect, Earth-centric, hidden perihelion trajectory was, Loeb calculated, a 1 in a billion chance. It was like a random person throwing a dart from across a football stadium and hitting the bullseye on a board they couldn't even see. It suggested not chance, but intent. This was not a random path. It was a deliberately planned, stealthy approach. But why would it hide? Loeb proposed a chillingly logical reason based on orbital mechanics. The reverse solar Oberth maneuver. The Oberth effect is a principle in astronautics where a rocket engine is most efficient when used at the point of highest velocity, typically at the closest approach to a massive body like the Sun. A spacecraft can get a huge boost in speed by firing its engines at perihelion. A reverse Oberth maneuver would do the opposite, use a powerful braking thrust at the point of maximum velocity to shed an enormous amount of momentum, allowing the object to break free from its high-speed interstellar trajectory and settle into a stable but permanent orbit within our solar system. This was the perfect orbital insertion strategy. By executing this critical, power-intensive maneuver while hidden behind the Sun, the probe would be completely unobservable from Earth. We would see it approach on a path that suggested it was just passing through. We would lose sight of it for 6 weeks, and when it re-emerged, it would already be a permanent resident of our solar system. Its trajectory irrevocably changed. The deed would be done before we even knew it was happening. Loeb's hypothesis was a warning. He argued that the sunward anti-tail was not just a strange emission, but likely the venting of a propulsion system, perhaps making final course corrections on its approach. The chemical and metallurgical signatures were evidence of its industrial self-sufficiency, its ability to repair itself and manufacture what it needed. He painted a picture of a hyper-advanced, autonomous intelligence executing a flawless, clandestine plan to infiltrate our solar system. He went further, speculating on its intent. Why the secrecy? Why the need for such a perfect maneuver? He proposed that this was not a friendly first contact. A benevolent explorer would likely signal its presence openly, This level of stealth and preparation, he argued, was more characteristic of a scout, a hunter, or a weapon. The probe's actions were not those of a peaceful ambassador, but of a highly intelligent entity with a clear strategic objective. Avi Loeb's controversial theory was no longer on the fringe. It was becoming the only one that fit all the terrifying facts. The world was being forced to consider that the silent intruder might be a predator, and it was using the laws of physics to set a perfect trap. As 3I Atlas sped toward its rendezvous with the sun, toward its 6-week period of concealment, its behavior grew even more alarming. The green glow, once a mystery, was now understood to be linked to the production of cyanogen, but the scale of that production was escalating at a rate that defied any natural explanation. The initial measurements were already high, but as it neared the sun, the production rate began to increase exponentially. It wasn't a steady rise, as you might expect from increasing solar energy, causing more sublimation. Instead, the output was following a precise, predictable mathematical formula. It was doubling its output every 72 hours with clockwork regularity. By the time it was a few weeks from perihelion, it was churning out approximately 20 grams of pure hydrogen cyanide every single second. To put that into perspective, 20 grams per second is 1.2 kilograms per minute. That's over 70 kilograms per hour and nearly 1.7 metric tons per day. A lethal dose of hydrogen cyanide for a human is measured in milligrams. This object was producing enough poison to kill millions of people every single hour, and the rate was still climbing. This explosive, formulaic surge was the final, horrifying proof that we were not dealing with a natural object. Natural processes are governed by the messy, analog laws of physics and chemistry. They don't follow neat, digital, exponential curves. This was the signature of a programmed process, an algorithm being executed. It was like watching a factory ramp up production according to a preset schedule. The implications were inescapable and utterly terrifying. Why would an interstellar probe be designed to manufacture one of science's deadliest poisons on such a massive scale? The conclusion, once unthinkable, was now staring humanity in the face. This was not just a probe. It was a mobile chemical weapon. Its design seemed terrifyingly efficient. It used its long, multi-billion-year journey through the interstellar medium to gather raw materials, carbon, nitrogen, hydrogen, from nebulae and the solar winds of countless stars. It stored and processed these materials using its internal factory. And now, upon arriving at its target system, it was activating its final protocol, the mass production of a potent toxin. The question of why was almost too horrible to contemplate. Was its goal to poison a planet's atmosphere? To contaminate its oceans? The amount of cyanide it was capable of producing, if sustained, could theoretically render a planet like Earth uninhabitable. Hydrogen cyanide is a chemical asphyxiant. It stops cellular respiration on a biological level. It would be a silent, invisible death that would spread through the biosphere, wiping out complex life with terrifying efficiency. The probe's behavior was no longer just anomalous or suspicious. It was overtly menacing. The cyanide surge was a declaration of capability, if not intent. It demonstrated that this ancient, intelligent machine was not just an explorer or a piece of industrial equipment. It was armed, and its weapon of choice was not a laser or a missile, but something far more insidious, the very building blocks of chemistry, weaponized on a planetary scale. The silent intruder was revealing its teeth, and the world's governments, watching in secret, finally understood the true nature of the threat that was about to hide behind the sun. The accumulating anomalies, the anti-tail, the green transformation, the impossible chemistry, the pure nickel, the ancient trajectory, the hidden approach, and now the exponential cyanide production collectively painted a picture so alarming that it triggered an unprecedented and completely secret global response. The evidence was no longer deniable, and the potential threat was existential. Humanity, without even knowing it, was placed on a war footing against an enemy it could not comprehend, in an operation disguised from the public as a series of unrelated research initiatives and solar observation campaigns. Every major astronomical observatory on Earth and in space was quietly redirected for a single purpose: continuous threat assessment of 3I Atlas. This was not a simple request. It was a complete and total mobilization of humanity's scientific eyes and ears. The Hubble Space Telescope, the James Webb Space Telescope, the Very Large Telescope. In Chile, the Keck Observatory in Hawaii, radio telescope arrays from Australia to Puerto Rico. All of them ceased their planned scientific projects, studies of distant galaxies, explorations of exoplanet atmospheres, research into the origins of the universe. All were indefinitely suspended. This planet-wide redirection was coordinated not through scientific channels like NASA or the ESA, but through secure military and intelligence networks. A secret council composed of scientific advisors, military leaders, and heads of state from the world's major powers was formed to manage the crisis. For the first time in history, geopolitical rivalries were set aside in the face of a common external threat. The knowledge was too dangerous to be made public. The potential for mass panic, social breakdown, and chaos was deemed too high. The decision was made to prepare in the shadows. This silent mobilization was a monumental undertaking. It meant that every single piece of data, every photon of light collected from 3I Atlas was being instantly streamed to secure data centers, analyzed by a global consortium of the planet's brightest minds, and fed directly to a command structure tasked with devising a planetary defense strategy. They were trying to understand their enemy. What were its capabilities? What were its weaknesses? Could it be communicated with? Could it be destroyed? The atmosphere within this secret global coalition was one of quiet, gnawing tension. They were watching a doomsday clock countdown. They knew the object was heading into its 6-week period of solar occultation. They knew Loeb's theory of the reverse Oberth maneuver was the most likely scenario. They were preparing for the moment it would reemerge, knowing that when it did, it would either still be on a harmless exit trajectory, or it would have successfully established itself as a permanent and potentially hostile new neighbor in our solar system. Contingency plans were drawn up, ranging from desperate attempts at communication using powerful radio transmitters to far more drastic military options. Though everyone knew that engaging a 7-billion-year-old piece of technology was likely a suicidal gesture. How do you fight something that can refine metal in the vacuum of space and has mastered interstellar travel? Our most advanced weapons were like stones and spears against a modern battleship. For the public, life went on as normal. People worried about politics, the economy, and their daily lives, all while a silent, undeclared state of emergency existed among those in power. the greatest story in human history was unfolding in secret, a testament to both our incredible technological capability and our profound vulnerability. The entire planet held its breath, waiting for the silent intruder to emerge from behind the sun. The 6 weeks of solar occultation were the longest in human history for the few hundred people who knew what was at stake. It was a period of agonizing silence. The world's most powerful telescopes, now pointed at the empty stretch of space where Three-Eye Atlas was predicted to reappear, saw nothing but the sun's blinding corona. Was it still there? Had the maneuver succeeded? Had it failed? Had it simply continued on its way, proving the entire panic to be a false alarm? Then, on December 8th, 2025, it emerged. The first telemetry data came from a solar observation satellite positioned to get the earliest possible glimpse. The moment the object cleared the sun's limb, its position was locked. The data was relayed to the global command center, and a hushed silence fell over the room as the computers began to plot its new trajectory. The process took only seconds, but it felt like an eternity. The result was confirmation of humanity's greatest fears. The trajectory analysis was unambiguous. It had executed a perfect propulsive maneuver. The object had shed a massive amount of velocity, breaking from its interstellar hyperbolic path. It was no longer a visitor, just passing through. Three-Eye Atlas had entered a permanent, stable, elliptical orbit within our solar system. Its new path would take it swinging out toward the orbit of Jupiter and then back in toward the inner planets. The debate was over. The silent intruder had just made our solar system its new home. But that was not the only change. The object that emerged from behind the sun was fundamentally different from the one that had entered. The brilliant green glow was gone, as was the cyanide production. It had been replaced by new, even more terrifying signatures. Spectrographic analysis detected the presence of short-lived radioactive isotopes in its emissions, elements that could only be the product of active nuclear processing. It appeared to have used its perihelion pass not only to break, but also to harness the sun's immense energy, perhaps to power a nuclear reactor or forge even more exotic materials. Most critically, it began to talk, not to us, but to itself. Radio telescopes, which had been listening intently, picked up a complex, structured, and unmistakably artificial radio signal emanating from the object. It wasn't a simple beacon or a chaotic blast of noise. It was a broadband, multiplexed signal, dense with information. It was the hum of a machine thinking. The patterns were non-random, intelligent, but utterly indecipherable. We were eavesdropping on the internal monologue of an alien mind. The puzzle was complete, and the picture it formed was one of awe and terror. Three-Eye Atlas was not a rock, not a comet, not a simple probe. It was a fully autonomous, self-sufficient, nuclear-powered, industrial-scale artificial intelligence of unknown and ancient origin. The debate was over. The analysis was complete. The thing we had tracked, studied, and feared was now our neighbor. It had moved in. It had unpacked. It was now orbiting the same star we were, a silent, thinking machine billions of years our senior. The age of human loneliness in the cosmos was over, but the age of uncertainty, of a profound and existential fear of the unknown, had just begun. The unthinkable had happened. Humanity was no longer alone, and our first contact was not with a biologist, but with a machine. The story of Three-Eye Atlas is a chilling reminder that the universe does not operate on our timescale or by our rules. For all our progress, we are infants in a cosmos that is ancient and filled with wonders and horrors we cannot yet imagine. This silent intruder has taught us a profound and humbling lesson. Our understanding of what is possible is limited only by our experience. We built models based on the natural world we could see, never conceiving of a technology so advanced that it would appear to us as a rebellion against physics itself. What can we take from this in our daily lives? It is a call to humility and to relentless curiosity. It reminds us to question our assumptions, to look at the anomalies in our own lives not as error, but as potential gateways to a deeper understanding. When something doesn't fit the pattern, our first instinct is often to dismiss it. But what if, like the sunward antitale, it's a sign that our entire model is wrong? This story teaches us that the greatest discoveries lie just beyond the edge of what we believe to be possible. It's also a lesson in unity. In the face of an existential, external context, humanity set aside its differences. It reminds us that the borders we draw on maps are meaningless from a cosmic perspective. We are all passengers on a tiny, fragile world, and the things that unite us are far more powerful than the things that divide us. Perhaps we don't need to wait for an alien intelligence to arrive in our solar system to start acting like a unified species. As we move forward into this new, uncertain era, we are left with questions that will define the future of our species. What is the purpose of this ancient intelligence? Is its silence a sign of indifference, observation, or something more menacing? And most importantly, how do we respond? Do we reach out in hope, or do we prepare for a conflict against an entity whose capabilities are, for all intents and purposes, godlike? What would you do if you were in that room when the final trajectory was confirmed? What would you have advised our world leaders to do next? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the deepest and most unsettling mystery of our time. I wish you all good health and a clear sky. If you found this story thought-provoking, please consider subscribing to the channel for more explorations into the known and the profoundly unknown.